Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're glad you're back with us. This is not our last week. So we decided that we are going to finish up most of what our planned discussion is this week as we cover empowered. But next week, we are going to have just an open discussion. So if you know of people who've been watching online or you've been watching online, please join us next week at this time. It's going to be pretty open-ended. We're going to generate some questions just for everybody. And then if anyone else has other questions, then we can just kind of shoot them around. At that point, we're all kind of the leaders that week. We want to hear what other people think, how they've put some of these things together and really try and learn some things from each other too. So we look forward to that next week at 7 o'clock. So we are going to go back to our PowerPoints here. See, I've already added the discussion. Look at that. I'm already ahead of everybody here. Oh, I have to do share screen. I didn't do that yet. My bad. Share screen. This one.
That one?
Yep.
Yeah.
Here we are. Okay. And now I'm going to change this so I can see everybody.
We're sorry if y'all can't see everyone. We're going to try and go back to gallery view as much as possible. And you can just yell at us if we forget and you want us to go back to it. We can. It's so much more fun when we do it that way.
We respond well to yelling.
We do.
Yeah. You're up.
All right.
Oh, no, I'll start. I guess I can
start.
So first is a reminder of what we are doing today. So
we never follow it. So
our plan is that we are going to talk about understanding emotions. So today is empowerment, and we're going to empowered, and we're going to try and understand what that emotion means. Then we're going to hear God's emotions and understand what God means about empowered and how to use that. And then try and discuss. So we definitely want to hear you. We have some discussion questions in the middle and throughout here, but we definitely want to hear from everybody. It really, last couple of weeks have been amazing, just getting other people's feedback and input. So we really appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and pray first. Susan, you want to start us off there?
Sure. All right, dear Heavenly Father, I just pray that you're with us throughout this discussion of empowerment. And I pray that you're with everybody and their safety with storms rolling through everywhere, and just with the youth as they meet a little bit later tonight. And I just pray you're with us, and we hear what you want us to say, and everybody hears everything the way that you would like it. Amen.
So, as we always say, peace. Well, I'm not to you, I'm asking peace. That was our topic last week. Any experiences of peace or peacefulness throughout the week that you'd like to share that you experienced from what we talked about last time?
Well, we can share where we were tested very quickly after the end of our session. We had a toilet overflow. And so it was quite unpeaceful cleaning the bathroom for an hour.
That is not content right there.
Yes. So Satan wanted to try us really quick.
Your peace was definitely.
But after that, it was fairly, peaceful the rest of the week. We had that to compare to.
That's good.
That's great.
Yeah, we bought a new air conditioning unit this week. Absolutely nothing peaceful about that, except that we didn't go on a little mini vacation because,
that's what we
couldn't.
Were going to do.
So we've had a peaceful week.
Yes.
Yeah, but we were blessed.
Come July, you will be thankful for that peace.
Yes, we'll be thankful after 2 days. I'm pretty. So will our renters of our other offices. So that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Is that our first share?
I think so.
That's our first share on this little PowerPoint screen right here. Woo, we've improved. So empowerment. This one is a fun one. This is actually, I'm hoping this rolls out the way that we visualized it. It was really interesting to put together. So the gallery, we're going to go to gallery view so that we can actually all see each other and hear each other. And I'm going to ask you the question. So using one word, just descriptor words, whatever you would like to say, what does it mean to be empowered? Or just the word empowered? What do you think of
when you hear that word?
When you hear that word?
I would say freedom to express your ideas, and then given the permission to act on them.
Okay, that's good.
I was going to
Anybody
say
else?
something along the same line, ability to or control of. I mean, that's kind of where my mind first went, was control. And of course, that can be some negative things to that, but that's like you're empowered to do something, you're able to be in control to do something. So that's where I initially went there.
Yeah, that's good.
The word that comes to mind for me is strong,
Mhm.
right? Power, right? Powerful.
Mhm.
If I go to that root word, the strong, if I'm empowered, then I am strong to be able to handle something.
I thought that was a skunk in Kevin's house.
That's our sheepdog looking.
You guys you're in a world of less peace tonight.
Yeah.
And we would not be empowered.
Yeah, we're not being or
That's pretty empowered of y'all. I think the word grounded. Like that was the one that kept coming to mind. Like and I don't know why, but feeling grounded or feeling like content.
Content's technically under peaceful, but
Yeah.
I mean, it leads to that, certainly,
It might.
I would imagine.
Anybody have, so the second question is, can anyone describe a moment of feeling empowered, of just having the feeling of being empowered?
I can't seem to empower my screen sitting up straight, so I'll be.
I think the response we're getting is something similar, because I think empowered is a word we don't really use or utilize a lot in our daily living, in our daily experiences.
Actually, I think about it a lot. I mean, one way I've been empowered is through my family, my growing up as a female, because we were all girls in my family.
Oh, wow.
And so there wasn't a dynamic, and I had a progressive father as far as women were concerned. And so that was the first thing I thought of.
Mhm.
Is that.
That's great.
That actually will hit on a little bit of something that I bring up in a couple slides. So that's actually pretty good. I was just going to go back to what happened with our neighbor. That was one thing I think of that was very empowering. And it was just, it took 2 hours for me to kind of stop and think and calm down. And after feeling so out of control, so Sean, kind of the opposite of what you said, so that does fit, just feeling that out of control. What do we do? I want to protect everybody. And then just starting to feel peace, because there's nothing I can do. We're being who we're supposed to be. If there's a mistake, we'll figure it out. If we need to go talk to him. And then I just felt empowered to be who God wanted me to be, and just be an example to him. And we had something interesting happen 2 mornings ago. We were sitting out on the back patio, and his son rode by in the golf cart, and we've never talked to him. He's never really said anything. He's always been kind of quiet, but he made eye contact and just waved and said hi to both of us very kindly, which was kind of like, I gotcha.
Like, I get it.
But it just, and that actually even just kind of a wave of peace. So it was just,
Right.
It's just, we're all trying to figure things out and who to be and how to be. So it was empowering not to let that fear and all that control us, and just let go of it. So that's kind of what I thought. All right, so we're going to stay in Gallup. We're going to go to the PowerPoint in just a second, but I wanted to talk about what I'm going to introduce next. So when Brian first began using the feeling grid, it was considered it was a wheel. So in the middle of the little wheel were the main feelings, and the one that was in there, the opposite of anger, was power. And if you go back and you Google the feeling wheel, you're going to see power in the majority of them.
Powerful, yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful, power. But that's the word that is the opposite of anger. And it's right in between peace and joy. And I just had a problem with that as Brian started teaching it to me and talking to me about it. And then when I would work with a couple, or we would work with a couple, the thought of saying, hey, can you look at each other and say when you felt powerful? Like, it just seemed to go against the whole goal of counseling. Just, I didn't like that word. So first of all, it went against the goals of counseling in my mind, whoever I had sitting in front of me. But then the second part was just a little, it doesn't work across genders. I think right now it just doesn't work, especially just with men. If you talk about power, there's some stigma to it. If you talk to women about having power, there's somewhat of a stigma. And if you're sitting and looking at a couple and saying, look at your spouse and talk about power, I just like, I don't want to do that. So I finally just said, can we change it to empowered, like to be empowered? And so when you look at your spouse or you're talking to someone, you're like, do you feel empowered or do you feel like you have power? So I want to talk a little bit about, I don't know how to do that, the empowerment versus power. So we're going to, there you go. Oh, it's in the way again.
I'm ready.
Okay. So empowerment versus power. So let's look at power. How is that defined? Power assumes the right to control others. Actually, if you just Google like empowerment versus power, it pulls up the coolest just paragraph on it. I loved it. And so power assumes their right to control others. So that's in controlling externally to others. Empowerment recognizes complete responsibility for self and the choices made by self. So everybody kind of talked a little bit about it when y'all gave examples about it being internal. So power, when you think about it, to me, my next thought was power is not necessary. We took it off the feeling wheel, even the feeling grid. It's like power is not necessary. Think for a moment, and actually if you have something, and name one area where power works. Not waterfalls, alternative energy, or superheroes. Just relationally with people. Like,
well, nobody measures their relationship by how much power they have in it. If they're doing that, you are way horizontal. You are not even really focused on the relationship. You're probably just focused on yourself. Like, oh gosh, I need to do something to gain some power in this relationship. Like, that's not, it seems gamey. It seems like trying to control. It doesn't seem like you're really invested in the relationship.
Like a good example is maybe early in marriages or even later, keeping score. You kind of like, well, he did this, so I'm going to do that. Well, he did this, and then that's keeping score is sort of kind of trying to keep power for yourself. So it is very horizontal. I didn't think about that. So power for us relationally is a very horizontal thing. So I was like, power is not necessary. So when you compare the two, the next one, power is externally driven. So it's externally driven. When you think of power, it's got to be something outside of you that's either coming towards you or that you're putting towards somebody else. So it's externally driven and it's not sustainable. And when I say not sustainable, it's just, you can't just hold your power over people. Eventually somebody breaks, which is a sad thing. Mm-hmm. So empowerment is very internally created and can be sustainable. And notice the can be is red, so we'll kind of pick up on that a little bit later, but it can be sustainable. So empowerment is internal. It is within us. So it's, so if our goal is not to be powerful, but search for empowerment, what does that look like for a person? So if we're just talking, and I don't know how else to say this, but being blunt, but not thinking spiritually, not thinking in the church or godly, thinking of just as us and humans, I wanted to think of how we deal with that. Because for us, I always have to think of, because I have clients who, when I think of being empowered, I can immediately talk about our faith. But if they're not Christians, I can't go straight to that. I can't go, well, let's talk about what God would think of that. You can't do that. So I need something else. So I go to self-actualization, which is a theory. There's two, it's used twice. You can go ahead. And we're going to go back to gallery view in just a little bit so we can all talk about this. So I want you to look at this for just a little bit, but self-actualization is in the blue, and this is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Has anyone heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs or learned it? You kind of remember it? I asked the the young lady that works for us at our office today, I go, have you heard of that? She's like, yeah, I took it in all my business courses. They introduced it to all our classes. And I was like, that's interesting. So I kind of talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs when it comes to working with clients, of trying to figure out how to find that internal strength. So I'm just going to talk about the triangle for a little bit, and you can go ahead and do that. So Maslow never really meant for this to be a pyramid or mutually exclusive levels. He kind of introduced them, and they can overlap, but I think it's actually really quite it makes sense if you think about it. So I have someone who comes into my office, or even when I was younger, if I'd call my mom, she would go straight to the red. She'd go down, and I'd ask my clients as well if they're depressed or not doing. I'm like, are you eating? Are you drinking? Are you getting some kind of exercise? Is your place clean? So are you like kind of doing something at the bottom level?
Functioning.
Are you functioning is what we want to know. And then safety, and then love and belonging, esteem, and it goes up. So just thinking about how they make sense, let's think about, are you eating? That's physiological. If you are, then you can work. Airplane oxygen safety always drove me crazy whenever they'd tell you, put the oxygen on yourself and then on the helpless child next to you. And I'm like, why? That's so mean.
What happened to women and children
Like,
first?
no kidding. But if you don't take care of yourself, then you're going to faint, and the child's going to faint, and no one's going to get helped, right? So you got to do the basics to get to the more difficult. Elijah, remember, he gets to eat cake. Like, I still love that he gets to eat cake while he recuperates, and then he goes out and helps people and does what God wants him to. So kind of notice the motivation is needs get met. I think this is just, it's interesting. So if you look at the green and below, motivation decreases as needs get met. Well, if you eat, are you thinking about eating anymore? You're not hungry. You're not thinking about it. The motivation to find food's gone, right? For safety reasons too. If a tornado comes through here, as soon as it's gone, I'm not really worried about it. I am personally, because there's so many storms lately.
There's one out there.
Like right now. So once it goes away, you feel safe and you're fine. It gets a little bit more difficult to just be that easy, and motivations probably do. But let's think about self-esteem. So if you're having a low self-esteem day, and then you end up having some things happen to increase your self-esteem, you're not worrying anymore about that, right? So your motivation goes down to meet that need. So let's look at self-actualization. So what keeps us from being in the blue triangle? Why aren't we all in the blue triangle? In this place, it's where growth happens internally. Motivation increases as needs are met. You get promoted at your job, and you become a little bit more competent at what you're doing. You're motivated to have more of that happen. So that's how you kind of move into the blue triangle. But what is the blue triangle? So what is self-actualization if we were going to define it? It's realizing your potential, being self-fulfilled, and achieving personal growth. Sounds pretty good, right? How many, we could probably go to gallery view. Yeah, you're on. That's Isabel and her. So when you self-actualize, I lost my question. What was I gonna ask? I blame Isabel.
Stop worrying about her. Stop.
So to self-actualize, all right, so Maslow describes this level as the desire to accomplish everything that one can, to become the best at what one can be. So how many of us, that's my question, how many of us actually live in that blue triangle? Do a lot of us live there? What do you think? You can also say, I have no idea.
Well, I'll have to be honest that I've depended on Jan to help me self-actualize more, because sometimes I'm a little oblivious to others, needs. So I know that she's always been more perceptive than I am.
What about you living your best life?
And so I don't, self-actualize very well, I don't think. But I
Okay.
never use that term, so it's new. First time I heard it today.
So it's kind of hard to give me an example, probably, huh?
Right.
I think so.
You can hear a little more about what y'all would use as examples.
Well, okay, so I think if everybody had self-actualized, we wouldn't have jobs. People wouldn't need help. They'd be doing just fine. So Sean, Emily, I know at least 4 of us would be out.
We're waiting on that day.
Yep. So, and we would love that.
Carpenters. That's what Sean and I are going to start our own carpentry company.
Yeah, same man.
Yep. I think he does a little bit of self-actualizing when he is building something. There's just this coming in. Yes. So that's what I work to attain with clients. Like, I think that's what they want. I don't really say it probably a lot because that's pretty lofty. So it is a lofty idea to think that every client's going to self-actualize. So self-actualizing is just coming to terms with who you are and being okay with it. So being internally peaceful about who you are, and just being okay that there's family, drama, or that you hurt somebody at some point in time, but you're going to kind of come back and be okay. You don't need to go in and talk to somebody about it right away. You actually can kind of find it in yourself to make it through. So that's kind of what I think of self-actualizing. But at the same time, to kind of keep it more worldly in the sense of just functioning and living in the world, it can be specific. So Kevin, you kind of touched on that. Self-actualizing can be specific, like becoming the best parent you can be. Like, I don't know if I've shared this, but I think the first 4 years of our kid's life, every night I go to bed, I'm like, good mom, bad mom, definitely bad mom. And then just hoping for a better day, like the next day, but just not feeling very self-actualized as a parent. And I think that took until like last year, which, of course, wavers. But again, a lot of us don't live in that, but it can be in different areas of your life too. So that's basically what self-actualizing is. It is in a way of being empowered, but we wanted to introduce it this way to where we deal with it on a daily basis, because there are people without Christ. There are people, and I think learning how to talk to people in that way is helpful as well. So I use self-actualization, and there's another theorist, Carl Rogers, that Brian was saying. He uses self-actualization too, which is just acceptance.
Different meaning, same words, but it's basically becoming good with who you are. So yeah. It's a person-centered approach. And basically, if you're sad, I'm good with you being sad. And then you be okay with who you are when you're sad, okay with who you are when you're scared, and whether things that have happened in your life, you're not trying to change them or make them different anymore. You're just self-actualized in that this is who I am and I like who I am. And so it's very similar when you look at like motivation and how that is impacted. It just has a different context.
One seems to be a little bit more behavior driven. The other seems a little bit more individualistic or
Humanistic.
I call him humanistic.
You said humanitarian.
I said humanitarian.
I was like, I don't know what he was like as a person.
So does everybody kind of get that and know that it's kind of like empowered? But so we're going to shift over, and Brian's going to introduce the very last subgrid. I don't know what to call it. Subgrid of the grid.
Subgrid. I like that. We're going to keep that. Okay. Let me fix some stuff here real quick so we can see what I'm doing. All right. And oops. I think it looks like this. Going backwards.
I don't think it works on mine. He's trying to get that little.
Look at that. Laser pointer. All right. We have a laser pointer here for our last subgrid, as it has been dubbed, empowered. So when Susan came up with this word, it was the best thing ever. And I think it really highlights these qualities that we're talking about, especially when we talk about self-actualization. And the way Susan brought up this concept of self-actualization, right? It's the pinnacle, it's the acme, it's the apex, it's the goal in life, is to achieve this. And if you think about it from an emotional standpoint, empowered is the place we all want to be. Empowered is the place where we say, if I'm sad, I don't want to be sad, I want to be strong. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be afraid. I want to be important and validated. I want to be confident and worthy. Right? These are powerful kinds of words to describe what someone might be feeling. And when you're in this lower side of your emotions, our goal is empowered. Even if we're joyful, and we'll talk about how that relates in just a moment, but even if you are joyful in dealing with, we want to turn that joy into something that's powerful, that we feel close to people, we feel self-aware, we want to be forgiving and faithful and generous, all of those things that help take that joy to the next level. So joy isn't even a resting spot. Again, these are, and we're going to pull up the full grid here in a moment to help explain something, but I also want to make a quick reminder that empowered is the opposite of anger. It is the opposite of anger. And we're going to talk even more about how they function they function in an opposite manner as well. So when we think about anger and we say, oh, he lost his temper, he lost control, right? Control, as Sean had pointed out, control is a good word for empowered, right? We feel able to maintain ourselves, right? We feel successful, balanced, confident, admired. All of those are wonderfully examples of what empowerment does when we feel that emotionally. Again, if y'all have questions, shoot them out here. Now I'm going to go to the full grid. Oh, wait, Susan has some questions on here. Did you want to cover those?
We just ask him. We were just, well, I do kind of want to ask everybody. So when you're looking at empowered, can you be empowered and angry? And these might just be said to ruminate, or if you really have a response, you can. Can you be empowered and fearful? Empowered and sad? So does the empoweredness, if that's the word, does when you're empowered and you share these other feelings of like sadness and fear, does that empowerment decrease or can it stay the same? So this is how I like to think about the main emotions, the main feelings, and how they interact and overlap. Can they overlap? There are two on this grid that do not overlap and cannot overlap. That's part of our theory of the grid, right?
Which ones?
This one.
Well,
which we'll talk about later.
Empowered can overlap. It has that power.
With anger?
Not with anger.
That was what I said.
Oh, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the two that you can't overlap anger.
The opposites, they don't.
Those don't overlap. You think they do?
I'm trying to understand your words. So you're saying like joy and sad overlap?
No,
Like
what I'm
using the
saying
word
is there's
overlap.
only two that are mutually exclusive.
Oh, okay. They are mutually exclusive.
Yes. Empowered and anger.
Can I throw just one? I mean, when you were asking that earlier, and just to that when anger comes into, I think we view anger in so many different ways, right? So it can be, we can just be angry at something, and there can be a healthy level of that, or there can be an anger in order to lower things and to feel more powerful or empowered. And so if that's where, that's where I went, when you were talking about that is, man, that anger is so many times there to, when I become fearful, man, I want to get out of that really fast. And so that's where anger comes into play.
Right. And I actually think with you talking about that, Sean, you might have something different, but just my background thinking of everything is correlated. I mean, everything. The amount of ice creams eaten and drownings, it's correlated. I mean, for whatever reason, we know, but it is, but it's not. So I always think everything's correlated. So with you saying that, it makes me think, you know what, they might not be mutually exclusive, but it could be like a 0.001, type of relationship, if you like correlation coefficients. But it's going to be the smallest of all of them because they fight.
Well, I think, Sean, you hit on a lot of points that hit where I would agree but not. So like you said, when I'm feeling sad, I want to get out of that. So I go to anger to make me feel better. So I would agree that we use anger to protect ourselves. But does that empower us? I don't think it does.
Right.
No, but I think it's a false sense of it.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My favorite example of this is thinking of like a 3-year-old, and a 3-year-old wants to correct dad. No, daddy, and like is trying to use all this anger at dad, like, and they're like tiny and you're big, and they have like zero power over. There's no empowerment, but they're trying because they just don't like that you took a bite out of their hamburger or something. And so that attempt with anger to be empowered is comical. It's not really empowered. It's an attempt at it. It's a false sense of one. And we do that in relationships. Oh my gosh. Just earlier this last week, she was like, there's a tractor up ahead. And I'm like, I know, like, cause like I need to be told when there's something in front of me.
He was not slowing down.
And I saw it, everybody, I saw it. So, but like my anger is trying to prove like, I got this, I don't need your help, right? So back off, lady. So that anger doesn't work because all it did was cause a lot of silence the rest of the trip. Then we had to kind of like make up and like, sorry, I said that, I shouldn't have done that. Like, and I feel bad, and then you feel bad because, well, you should feel bad too because you didn't even tell me that. But all of those things are happening, but mad didn't work.
Right.
So I think you got it, Sean. I was just making sure
Yeah.
I clarified it. It's that
Yeah.
false sense of empowerment. You're right on.
And I just saw it as it kind of comes in and it can go away. If it doesn't stay long, it's not going to decrease all your empowerment or having empower.
So my answer to that question, can you be empowered and angry? Nope. Like it's not possible to be, you can't be disgusted and forgiving at the same time. You know, like I'm going to be disgusted with what's happening and really feel important. Like that's it doesn't work. People aren't going to see you as important because you think things are disgusting.
It reminds me of the part in You've Got Mail. Anyone seen it? Great movie, hundreds of times. Have a poster on my wall. But when they're sitting in the movie theater arguing about the fact she didn't vote, and he's like, I forgive you. That's why the hot dog was singing, by the way. All right, so next question. I kind of went through them. So can empowered share any of the other feelings? They can coexist more so than the empowered and angry, which we kind of say theoretically don't exist together at the same time. But I think they can.
And that's part of something similar to Maslow's theory of hierarchy is I can be self-actualized at work, but not self-actualized on a basketball court, right? I can have that full completeness. So self-actualization in the way that he describes it is something that varies by location, I guess you could call it. So you can be afraid in one place and empowered in another. So that can definitely exist.
Any comments or thoughts?
I may have an example of a time where I felt a little bit of empowerment and anger at the same time, and y'all might disagree, but on the last day that I was with my ex-husband, we had this huge fight. Like I was so angry at him because of what he was doing to me, and I realized I cannot live like this anymore. So I felt empowered that I had the ability to leave him and have a better life by myself, but I was also very angry with him because I felt like he tricked me sort of into marrying him, and I thought he was this different person, and then he kind of turned violent, you know? So in that sense, like I can go back to that day and feel like I was feeling that both of those, I mean, maybe it was just a small sense of empowerment, like you do not have the right to treat me this way. I'm not going to be with you anymore. Get out. You know, it was my house. He was living, he moved into my house. So I did feel like I had the ability to do that. Like, you know, no, to put my foot down and say, this is it, enough, you know, but I was also very angry with him at the same time.
Right.
That's interesting.
That's actually, that is.
Yeah.
Stumped.
Part of me would dissect it a little more. But I'd love to talk more about it Laura sometime just to kind of, because I want to try and, we don't have time to do that today. Maybe we can talk about it next week if you feel comfortable doing that. Because part of me would dissect it a little differently. But
that,
I want to hear that because, again, I want the challenge to try and understand. This is my theory, my idea, but I'd love to hear how instances where it doesn't work. So that would be important to know too.
which your situation's also very unique, and
Right.
so you could, I want to say have both. Like, it's making sense to me. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was interesting, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Okay, so I'm gonna finish up before we get to hearing about God's emotions. How are we on time? Oh goodness gracious, Brian, hurry up. Okay, so here we are. I'm gonna change this so I can see real quickly. So here we have the full grid. Oops, dang it. It's gonna go backwards. There we go. Here we have the full grid. And the way that we began initially, we talked about the idea that anger is probably the most often expressed emotion that we use from this side of the feeling grid. And we use anger to protect ourselves from feeling either sad or scared. So it's what we naturally or have been taught, or as humans, we gravitate away from our fear and sad and use anger. And we've talked about how that doesn't work, right? That's the main principle. What we need to be is sad and be scared. If we talked about it from sad, we're going to talk about it in a moment. How do we get to empowered? If we're feeling sad, the way we have to get to empowered is that we have to be sad in order to get joy. When we get joy, we've talked about joyful is also something that leads to peace. And we talked about peace that leads to joy. When we're scared, we have to be scared, acknowledge our scared, our fears, and we have to share those so that we can be comforted, and that's what brings us peace. So over on this side of the grid, what happens is the way we achieve empowered is that when we feel joyful and we feel peaceful, we naturally gravitate toward feeling empowered. So here's a little experiment. Close your eyes for a second. And I want you to think of somebody as I describe this person. This person is enthusiastic. They are hopeful. They are noticed, and they seem delighted. But this person is also accepted, loved, they're safe, and they are reinforced. So you have that person in your mind. Would you not also describe them as important, successful, as aware, as faithful? And that's the point. The way that I just described 4 or 5 words from joy and 4 or 5 words from peace, and then we view that person as well as being empowered. So the way that I would have described, until Laura destroys my theory later, is that anger covers up our sadness and fear. But what's really interesting is that empowered doesn't cover up our joy and our peace. Empowered coexists and accentuates our joy and our peace. It inflates it. I'm going to go back to gallery view here so I can see if there's any questions about what I just said. I can't see now. Any questions about that idea, that premise?
Well, one thing I would say is that there's always an exception to the rule.
Yes.
And I'll just leave that at that.
Yes.
No, exactly. No,
It's a theory.
it's a theory. It's not truth.
Yes.
And before Laura brought that up, I think righteous anger was something that I was thinking about, and you can have a righteous anger, and I feel like that can coexist with being empowered, because when you're feel empowered, I think you can have kind of a righteous anger towards justice and some of those kind of things. So I don't know. Just a
No,
thought.
I agree. That's a good point. That's a good way to add to it. We've talked about God being angry, God having righteous anger, and there's certainly those types of situations. So that's a good point. Maybe it can, when that anger is righteous and appropriate, that we are then then maybe it shifts us to empowered.
Right. And I
That's a good
think
thought.
I think
I'm
the
gonna write
gap in what, not the gap, but I guess the exception, as Sarah called it, which is a better word, might kind of get filled in a little bit as we process through this. And because we've been talking about this in a worldly way, in just a human way, because we are human. So I was like, I want to start with being human. God knows we're human. He tells us continually we're going to make mistakes. So let's move to, we're going to get through the next couple slides, and then we're just going to go try and get to discussion. Yeah. So this is kind of how I'm wrapping it up, I guess, which is actually kind of simple, but I think empowered is simple based on what we're about to see. So hearing God's emotion. So we always go into the God part in the role modeling of God and where we find it in the Bible. We like to bring that in, of course, because as we always should. But, oh, I can? Okay. Oh, cool. So basically, the more time we spend with God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus, the more we're actually able to discern more. So discernment grows in us when we spend time with the Holy Trinity. And we can hear God sooner. So we actually can hear him instead of like, was that God? Is that what I'm supposed to do? I'm not sure. No, you know, when you spend that much time with God, his dreams for us are a lot more clear to us. And actually his dreams for others are also clear. So the word discernment was the big part of why I put this in here. We need to hear God's emotion. We need to hear God. And so the discernment is where I always use the word discernment whenever you're empowered. You have so much more discernment in your decisions and whether or not you're supposed to be mad at your neighbor for what he did or not, or where you're supposed to just let it go and to kind of notice maybe that God's got a purpose or a plan for what's going on and what's happening in life. So if power is not necessary, like I had said earlier, where does power live? I mean, after all, it is the root word of empowerment, right? So it's got to be somewhere. So where we put it is God is power. He's allowed to be power because he's God. Jesus is our empowerment. So where do we get our empowerment? We get it from Jesus. So I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So all of a sudden, Brian looked up at me and he's like, through Christ who strengthens me. And then I'm like, Philippians 4:13. We always remember that one because it's a great verse, but it's also our kid's birthday. So 4:13. So I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Let's change the words on that.
Yeah.
I can do all things through Christ who empowers me.
Right.
Same thing. Strong is one of the words in the feeling grid. It is the opposite of mad. So I can do all things through Christ who empowers me.
But empowerment is yours. That's what it says in this verse. You have empowerment. You can be empowered from early on, from the very beginning, if you choose Christ to be the one who strengthens you or empowers you. And this is kind of how I always saw that. So I think I switched them. That's right. So no, this is our question.
Yeah.
So our question is, and we're going to go to gallery view, is it idealistic to believe one can go from the left side of the grid, which is what? It's the anger, it's the not negative, but the feelings we don't want to have all the time. Can we go straight from the left side of the grid straight into empowered? Is it idealistic to think that that could happen?
Yes, because I mean, Brian said it's best to go across. Oh, Diane, you say.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Could you repeat that?
So is it idealistic to believe?
I didn't mean.
Oh, Kevin, you want Kevin to talk?
No. Okay, I didn't want to jump
Yes.
in on Diane.
Either one. No,
ahead,
you
Diane,
didn't.
because I've lost.
I think I inadvertently hit my button. Sorry.
That's fine.
It's okay. Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was just going to say that Brian just really said a point that I remember earlier in one of our sessions of saying you're going to go across the grid and then move toward empowerment to the center because, and so, but the key thing is what you're bringing is that it's God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit and the people that God's put close in your life. And that's where I guess I was going with my first reaction to self-actualization because that was so close to selfish in my mind.
Right.
That you, if you're going to truly in a godly way self-actualize, you're going to have to use the input of your closest brothers and sisters in Christ, and if you're married, your spouse, to really have a healthy self-actualization that doesn't dip into selfishness or self-righteousness because you've got it together and you're empowered.
Right.
And so I really like the way that y'all made us think that out even more, because sometimes you do the God example first and then we try to apply the human. And so this was good, the way that you did it tonight. It made me really capture it more, I think.
Thank you. I was actually nervous about saying we're going to talk worldly for a little while, but
No.
as humans, we kind of needed to see what we're like without God.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other ideas about whether it's idealistic to believe you can go straight from the left side of the grid straight to empowered?
As I talked about before, there was a lot of empowerment given to me as in my growing up years, and a lot of people don't get that, and so I think we're not all starting at the same place with our family of origin. Obviously, we're not. So I think that's a factor in how easily that can be done, or how sad or angry or scared you are based on how it was when you were growing up.
And you actually just hit on something that Brian and I talked about, because I came up with early on, I wanted to use the man who was possessed by the legion of demons. And I was listening to Tim Keller, and he was like, there's this guy just sitting there all dressed, looking just fine, but just a little while ago, he was not doing so well. And I thought about that, and I was like, wow, he went from demon possessed, running around naked, cutting himself, having to live out in caves, Jesus coming, just making him clean, and then him saying, I am clean, can I go with you and do what you do? And Brian was like, well, yeah, but you don't know where, like you just said, you don't know where he was before and after. And that story I wanted to tell because of the question I had, which pulls this together, is if we did go from sad or frustrated straight to empowered, where would our faith be? So that is also, it's not my job, it's not my place. I can't judge and wonder where he was, but so where people start and how long it takes to go, to become empowered. There's got to be a faith building in there, to me.
To go, in my mind, to go from fearful straight to empowered requires a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what Jesus did for this man, right? He went from possessed for how long? Who knows? We don't know what his internal struggle was at that point with all of those demons possessing him, but he went straight to empowered, and that was a miracle. And so to move that way, as Susan was saying, we have to progress, because I don't think Jesus gives us those miracles all of the time. In fact, I think he grows tired of them, because people are just looking for that easy, straight to empowered. We have to work our way into the hierarchy of self-actualization. Self-actualization is still different from being empowered. Didn't we say that?
What?
Do we have another slide about that?
Yes, we
Okay.
have one more.
But that's where I think we all progress through it differently, for sure. As Sarah was saying, like some people just they don't understand sadness. I think I'm naive to certain emotions and parts of that spectrum just because I've never been exposed to things that would lead me in that direction. Thankfully, it's not that I'm blessed or I just feel grateful that I don't, but I can also connect to other people's emotions and know what they are empathically because I have my own experience. That's why I can have people in a room for group therapy with someone who's had a sexual assault or someone who's lost family because of their alcoholism, or people who are just, they worry all the time because they're all looking to feel empowered, but their pathway to it is a little different. And we can all connect emotionally.
I think the hesitation is saying that God can't take someone from frustration straight to being empowered. That's where when Brian and I brought the question up and we just kind of looked at each other and asked it, I'm like, I'm not saying it. Like God can do whatever he wants to do.
Oh, sure.
That's where we came to, but based on us as humans and seeing who we are and how God so intricately has to work with us, I think that we can see that shift. Like Sarah said, I could, that empowerment was you were blessed with kind of being in that and feeling that empowerment. That's not to say someone is going to grow up somewhere very differently and just ease right into that. I think it would take kind of gaining the confidence and understanding. And so it's a really tough question, but I think it's a really good question because you want to quickly say, of course God can do that. But I just, and almost like from a professional kind of opinion, I would want to say, I just don't see that happening as much. I would think there has to be growth. So what we come to is you have to kind of move from anger or sad and fearful through peace and joy, and you naturally gravitate to being empowered. I still can't just sit here and say God will not empower people straight from sad to good. I think he can. I think it's also it's a really tough one, but our answer is it's pretty idealistic.
Well, I seem to be talking a lot tonight, but I was looking at this chart and it says on the empowered part, it says forgiving. And I was thinking about what a connection there is between being forgiven and then the connection with grace, and how really it's really almost, it's too good to be true that we can sin and be forgiven. And so it takes our hearts a while to say, could that really be?
Yeah.
Surely not, but it is. We are forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very empowering as a child of God. Besides being the child of the King and adopted into his family and all of those very empowering things, but the forgiveness, man, I think that's huge as far as empowerment goes, as children of God.
Yes. And so the next slide we're going to show you is going to show you how we pull those together. It's going to pull together the rub, because there's a rub to saying, yes, it's idealistic. I don't, and this isn't absolute, by the way. God. But, do you want me to say this? So,
so we were reading the Philippians 4:13, and it's famous. It's on athletes' t-shirts for FCA. It's everywhere. But what doesn't get enough credit is Philippians 4:12.
mm-hmm.
And so this is still Paul writing to the Philippians and talking about how he's glad that they're concerned for him. And so he says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. So my study Bible tells me that the word content in the Greek literally translates to self-sufficient. Self-sufficient. So he's describing that I've been in need and I've had plenty, but I know the secret of feeling self-sufficient, and that is that through Christ I am empowered in both. It's why we're not empowered because we win the lottery. We're not empowered when we have needs. We are empowered and truly self-sufficient with God only. Only that way are we empowered. So this is that distinction, and Susan's probably going to talk about it, but that's the distinction between self-actualization and empowered.
So this is the self-actualization. In this one, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. This is empowered. So what we kind of teased out of it is, so we self-actualizing is technically starting in the anger subgrid, moving through sad, fearful, toward joy, peace, and eventually into empowerment. That's self-actualization. That's worldly. That's what humans do every day. We all do that. We all want to become better at what we do. Self-actualizing is not sustainable alone. So you can self-actualize, but as we said, you can become a really great parent. I can wake up the next morning and do a terrible job and forget to feed my kids. And then I'm a bad parent. Then I have to start over again. I can lose my job and I was really good at it, but I did something bad.
So self-actualization is constant and temporary. It's a constant search for that place of empowerment, and the empowerment idea emotionally and secularly doesn't stay.
Right. So it's not sustainable. So we can't just meet self-actualization and maintain it and be sustainable. So we're going to lose that. It's going to happen. But we believe if you have chosen to have Jesus Christ with you, then you will be more than self-actualized. You will be empowered. So it's Jesus Christ. It's our faith that empowers us. Not all the good stuff we do, like works don't take us to heaven either. But you can't maintain self-actualization if you are not empowered by Christ. If you are empowered by Christ, you will be self-actualized. That's the rub. That's the last part. If you are empowered by Christ, I don't care about self-actualization, right? Because I'm good.
And faithful is on the feeling grid under empowered, which is next to aware. So the idea of being aware is being faithful. The idea of being forgiving is empowered, because it means that it's the opposite of being critical and disgusted with where we are and where our place might be or where someone else might be. And that's the beauty that Jesus provides with empowerment. So we just are thankful for y'all's patience with tonight. We're going a little over. We'd like to hear any thoughts or questions from y'all.
Just something this is all really thought-provoking for me. So I really appreciate you kind of getting the thoughts rolling there. But as you were talking about that, it made me think of the word that's used in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. They inherit the earth.
Because the meek are really, when I read about this, it talked about a horse. A horse is much stronger than the rider, but the horse is what, is letting the rider direct it, the power. And so anyway, these are incoherent thoughts right now that are just jumping around in my brain. But maybe meekness is a biblical expression of some of what you were trying to talk about there, right there at the last. So thank you.
I think meekness is empowering. It is one of those words, because when you read it, it's like the meek, but the meek are the ones who allow, right? If I remember how we did that, that's actually pretty cool. Yeah. I like that.
And one thing that keeps coming up to me is that scripture that, you know, his strength is made perfect in our weakness. And I think that kind of piggybacks on that a little bit. And that empowerment really comes through the Holy Spirit working through us. I don't know, is another thought that I kind of had that y'all have been talking.
That I like, we didn't really even talk about that. And is it Becca, was it you talking?
Mm-hmm.
Becca,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
I lost my train of thought, but yes, I think weak falls into that. We give it to God. I think that to me is what that kind of aligns with. I don't think that's what I was going to say. I forgot, but yes, that is, we have to allow Christ. I know what it was. I'm sorry.
And that's why we work through this feelings, right? Our weakness. We are made strong. Strong is under empowered by acknowledging our weakness, our sadness, our fears. Our anger is the opposite of that. It doesn't make us strong. And to not be sad, to not cry. Oh, I have to be strong for my family. That's not strong, right? That's not dealing with your emotion. So dealing with your emotion by acknowledging, by recognizing this weakness, as it's so dubbed socially, is what makes us strong. That's how we work through it. That's how we become empowered. It's like, it's this forgiveness idea. Like it's unexplainable. Like, how do you make something weak strong? It's not like we're exercising our weakness here or sadness. We don't want to flaunt it or spend an hour in the sadness gym. We want our sadness just becomes strength.
But I think what is becoming strong is the relationships.
That too.
So like, just quickly, Isabel and James is more check in with me. Hey mom, how are you doing? Are you okay? If something happens. Isabel sees me get frustrated, and then I got my frustration face on too. So we both just kind of back up and put up this, I'm not going to talk about this for a minute. But James kind of does that differently. And I actually talked to Isabel one time. I'm like, do you just get mad? She's like, no, I just don't know what to do with you. So I just kind of get mad too. And so we talking about that and talking about the embarrassment of how we deal with it, and showing our weakness and showing that we're not strong. We're both in a moment of like, we don't know what to do with this. It brought us together, and we all went out to an event. It was a family member that was involved with that. And that day went so well because we were all so attuned to each other, because we let that down and showed where we are weak and where we need help. So it's the relationship that is strong. It's that relationship that with God that's strong. So yeah, it's a paradox, but it's a lovely one.
I do think that God can miraculously take us from our sadness to our empowerment.
Absolutely.
I've been there. When I found at the point that I realized that we were really at the end of the road with Ken, and there didn't seem to be much else we could do, and I didn't want to let go of the hope that I had, and the hope he still had, and I was grappling with that, and I was so sad. And he just clearly said to me, surely goodness and mercy is in this place too. It didn't mean that the sadness went away, but I was empowered to walk through the sadness.
Yes.
And I'm still learning that lesson. I don't want to stay in the sadness, but sometimes I just have learned I have to sit in the sadness, and I just have to say, this is where I am, and I'm going to sit here with this, not alone, but with you. And I find myself bouncing around a lot now. And so there's a process to it also, but I've seen some miraculous going, not that the sadness went away, but I did have the empowerment that I could walk through it with God's help.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. That's the miracle part of it, and and he blessed you with that.
And then sometimes I think I don't want to walk through it. So then we have to go back through it again.
It's so hard. But again, I think, like Becky said, those hard things make us stronger. They make us better. They make us closer, make us feel not alone and connected because we are walking through it.
Right.
Diane, I think too, probably the reason that you felt that empowerment so quickly is just because of that you always have with God, and that you've shown all of us throughout the years. So I think that foundation got you to get to that empowerment so quickly because he's just such a big part of your life.
Well, I did have a lot to remember of him having rescued when we were in bad situations, not always exactly the way I wanted, but that he was there regardless. So I had that advantage of being able to look at that. But honestly, that night, I just was caught off guard. I didn't think that was where we were. And I just felt like it was a miraculous intervention. Now I feel like I'm in a process intervention.
Yes.
Right. Well, what if
awesome.
I think you kind of have what I was thinking of with the time frame of it, like he granted you that miracle early on, and so now you're kind of going through that the harder, more difficult struggle. But it's like, it sounds like you go back to that moment and it's like this is what's going to help me. And so it's sometimes on God's timeline, not our timeline. And it's not the struggle, and then the release of it. It's like, I'm going to show you that I'm with you, and I'm going to empower you now so that you can do this later. It's beautiful and really difficult too.
It is. I think I'm growing. For a while, I felt shame over my sadness and guilt over being there because I felt like, God had been so good and he had blessed so much. And I really should be more mature and farther along than I am at this process.
Oh, you sound so mature.
Well, I'm not. That's what I'm wanting to be. But, I think now he's given me permission. I think when I realized that, Jesus was sad, Jesus wept. And so I can do that too, and I don't have to do it alone. I think I was trying to do it alone.
Right.
And so
That doesn't work too well.
no, it doesn't. And
We've always had the permission. It's just when we recognize and give ourselves that permission, or give attention to that permission and allow that. That's a really beautiful story.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That was. Well, we have captivated you for 16 minutes past the hour. So. Wow.
You must have to go pick up your children from the living room.
I wish we could go back, and I wish I knew about the gallery view like 7 months, like weeks ago. So,
sorry.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But we would love to do one more week, and we could all spend some time talking about everything. So if you want to gather your questions and gather your discussion, we're going to bring pizza. So,
yeah, we'll bring the pizza, everybody.
Or cookies. He makes really good chocolate cookies. Yes. But thank you for talking through tonight with us. Tonight was.
It's hard.
It was hard.
That's why I let Susan do it.
To pull it together.
I didn't want to do it. It's hard.
That was all mine. Wasn't that great?
You were very empowering.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, y'all have a wonderful night, and we will see you next week. So yes. Yep.
Hey guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Emily, I'm going to text you right now.
Awesome.
Okay.
Brian, I'm gonna text you right now.
All right.
Oh, not if I text you first.
Hang up, hang up, hang up,
Have a great rest of the week.
hang up. You too, Kevin.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, Diane.
Bye.
Bye, Becca.
Went in there and